Ok, muchas gracias a quienes ya están de vuelta y gracias también a quienes
Well, thank you very much, and thanks to the people who are having their seats. We are ready in order to resume our meeting during this second part of our 41 internal meeting, internal auditors meeting. Thank you very much for having your seats back, and thank you very much to the people who are logging in. Well, now we will have the next presentation, so you will see a different type of energy. We're going to speak about inclusive leadership, promoting objectivity through inclusion. And for this purpose, we have international speaker, and we kindly request you to give her a big round of applause to Ama Agyapong.
Buenas
Muchísimas
tardes. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I want to first thank Gabrielle and team. Thank you for having me here. I'm honored to share the stage with such brilliant presenters. I also want to say hello to those of you logging in online. Thank you for being here. We feel your virtual presence. Now, a lot was said in that awesome introduction. Yes, my name is Ama Agyapong, and you see my credentials on the screen. 15 years of HR leadership experience. I'm certified as an EEOC investigator, but there's one thing that I take the most pride in, and that is that I'm a mom. So if it's okay, I want to reintroduce myself. I'm going to try it in Spanish. Bear with me. Okay? So, hola. Me llamo Ama.
Hi, my
Soy
name
una
is
madre,
Ama.
hija, nieta,
Am
y hermana.
the
How
mother,
did I do? Yes?
sister, and
Okay.
grandma and mother, and this is what
And I
I know.
mention that because
Y
those are the
les menciono
identities I
porque estas
take
son
into
las
the workplace.
identidades que yo
And
llevo
those are
a
the
mi lugar de
identities a lot of
trabajo y
you
son
take
las
into the workplace.
identidades que
Your
muchos de
fathers,
ustedes
your grandfathers,
llevan a su lugar
your
de
mothers, your
trabajo.
aunties, your grandmothers and grandfathers. And that shapes how you see the world and how you see the workplace. So, we're going to talk about some fun things today. We're going to talk about inclusive leadership. We have discussed a lot of technical things today. And what I want to do is tap into the inner you. I was talking to Patricia earlier, and she said, leadership is a state of being. Who are you for your teams? Who are you for your employees and your stakeholders that you help to support? So, we're going to talk about the Deloitte 6 C's of inclusive leadership. We're going to also talk about self awareness and how that helps to impact objectivity, efficiency, and also how you engage with audit accuracy. So if you have someone on your team today where you're like, oh, I need to have a conversation, they're not doing so well, you should listen to me. If you want to increase engagement or morale on your team, you should listen to me. Or if you want to improve efficiency and productivity, that's a reason for you to listen. So, I want to start off with some engagement, please. I'm going to need your help with this presentation. When you hear the word inclusive leadership, what's the first word or phrase that comes to mind? What's the first thing that comes to mind? Please scan the QR code and put those thoughts on the screen. Inclusive leadership. Ah, okay. Thank you for that. Yes, empathy, open mindedness, community, absolutely. These are good. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. Equality, yes. Equidad, yes. Empatia, which I think means empathy, yes. Yeah, okay, all right. Yes, we are on the same page here, absolutely. Inclusive leadership it's really all the things you are putting on this screen, from equality to teamwork to community to diversity, all of those things. And I like to describe it as a story. So, growing up, you're going to hear me talk a lot about my child and my grandparents because they were very influential. Growing up, my grandparents had certain rules in the house. I don't know if you can relate, but my grandparents were very strict. My grandmother is 92 years old. And even when we come to sit down and eat, we put phones away, we take off our shoes, there are no wearing pajamas to the table. We all gather hands and we pray. And when my grandfather was alive, he led the prayer. And afterwards, we eat. Who can relate to that? Yeah. Now, one time I had a friend come by, and I did not tell my friend the rules of engagement. So they came in the house, they didn't take off their shoes, they sat at the table with their phone. People were gathering hands to pray, their eyes are wide open, and they're looking like, why are you touching my hand? And my grandmother and grandfather were like, don't invite them to this house again. They have no home training. But was it them or was it me? Did I communicate the rules of engagement when they walk into my home? Did I tell them the spoken and unspoken rules of being at grandma's house? I did not. And oftentimes, this happens in organizations. You see, it starts with onboarding. We hire someone, and we may train them, we may not. But then, once they start working, we might tell them the policies, we might tell them the procedures, but are we telling them the spoken and unspoken rules to be successful at your organization? That is inclusive leadership. And keep in mind, you don't need a team and you don't need a title to be a leader. Leadership comes with leading yourself, your community, your home, your teams, and the people within your orbit. So here's the business case, okay? A business case is a well-seasoned argument outlining why a specific initiative should happen. So the definition of inclusion is the action of including something. But when I go into organizations and I am looking at their company culture to see if there are any gaps or risks within their people, I'm looking to say, is your workplace a culture where everyone, every employee, regardless of their background, do they feel included? Do they feel valued? Do they feel heard, respected? Are they empowered to contribute their unique brilliance to the conversation? That is what we are looking at. So here are some of the benefits of inclusive leadership. As you see, there's innovation and collaboration within audit. It increases efficiency. It increases cultural competence. It helps with accuracy and better questioning, better relationship building. And in the United States, it's a very litigious place. I don't know if you all have heard. There are some interesting things that go on in the United States, and we have different governing bodies. So within the United States, we have something called the EEOC. It's the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and they prohibit harassment and discrimination. And so with inclusive leadership, it minimizes liabilities, lawsuits, and claims. It helps with fairness with your service delivery, and ultimately, it helps with employee retention because we want to hire people, we want to develop people, and we want to promote people and keep that institutional knowledge. And the 6 C's of inclusive leadership is one of the ways in which we can do this, because inclusive leadership impacts organizational innovation and also audit integrity. So one of the speakers earlier spoke about how do we know where to look? How do we know what opens risks? I would say partnering with HR. Those areas that have high complaints, those areas that have high or low engagement, those areas that have a lot of people on performance improvement plans, those are often indicators on how your team is feeling within your organization, and that can also open your teams up for a lack of ethics, for not following compliance, and for also a lack of judgment. So these are the 6 C's. The first one is commitment. Are you committed to doing what's fair, what's equitable, and what's right? So a leader's role in equitable governance, it's committed to inclusion because it aligns not only to personal values, but you believe in the business case that I previously suggested and mentioned. But with that commitment, it's, am I going to do what I should do even when it's hard? And that goes into courage. You see, courage is interesting because that is challenging the status quo with policies and behaviors. And some of you might be like, well, Ama, you don't understand my organization. I'm not the CEO, and I can't push back on leadership. And I'll say that's fair. But I'll also ask, what data have you looked at to support some of the things you're seeing? So here's a quick story, courage. I was helping an organization create their bereavement policy. So in the United States, they get time off if a loved one passes away. Well, we're creating this policy, and the CEO tells me exactly what they want for this policy. And in the policy, they said you get 3 days off for bereavement, and within those 3 days, they then list the family members you are allowed to take time off for. Those family members were mother, father, and child. Well, I told you, I'm a sister, I'm a mother, I'm a granddaughter, and that shapes how I see the world. So I said, excuse me, courage, because they hired me, right? I didn't want to lose the contract. I didn't want to get fired. So I said, excuse me, may I ask why you're only giving 3 days for bereavement, and then you're choosing to list the people they can take off for? They gave me their answer, and I said, well, may I provide some cultural context? This policy is very much based in Western culture with the nuclear family. What about cultures that have a multi-generational extended family where their grandparents and their aunties were very much a part of their lives just as much as the mother and the father? You're excluding people by listing the family. And who bereaves in 3 days? I remember when my father passed away, he's from Ghana, it took a month for the family to even get their visas to get to the United States. These are things we had to consider, but it took courage to even mention something. Cognizance of bias, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but it's identifying biases in your service. Inclusive leaderships are mindful of the organizational impact. So here's an example, and I'm sure you can relate, being an internal audit. Are people happy to hear that you're coming to their departments? Are they like, oh my goodness, I'm so excited you're here? No. You see, I was an internal audit when I first got out of college, and they hired me to audit the C-suite, so the executive's expenses. So me, 22 years old, is supposed to send an email to the CEO and tell him he is overusing the company jet. Yeah, that was interesting. And every time they got an email from me, they seemed annoyed. And every time I went to external Advisory offices, they weren't happy to see me. That's because they had a bias of internal auditors. They automatically assumed I was there to be like, gotcha, you're not doing your job, right? Versus I was there to uncover maybe some risks, maybe some mistakes, maybe some compliance issues to help the overall company. But cognizant of bias it goes a little further. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Curiosity. So leading with questions. Leading with open-ended questions, not interrogating and acting like you know the answer, or acting like the person in front of you does not know what they're doing, what their jobs are, or what they're even talking about. That curiosity is about engaging a variety of voices with decision-making, especially when you're thinking about mindset and generational differences within the workplace. I heard that mentioned earlier. Just because someone started a job doesn't mean they've never done the job. Or maybe they have incredible insights because they're new to the organization. So how are we practicing curiosity to ask questions and get that feedback from the individual? Cultural intelligence, when you're going to local offices, how are you having those conversations? How are you greeting people? How are you asking questions? What are the assumptions that you're making when you're engaging with those people? And then finally, collaboration is my favorite because when I was in internal audit, I did not realize how many people I was going to collaborate with. Not only the technology team, but human resources. I had to definitely collaborate with the finance department and the marketing department. But how am I also collaborating with people on my team? Maybe someone is better at one aspect of risk assessment versus someone else who might be better at data analytics. And how are we merging those two together? Now, let's talk about workplace biases, because bias is like one of my favorite things to talk about. I know, it sounds strange, but I'm fascinated by how the brain works. You see, our brains like to create a filter or a template to process information. And when it processes that information, the moment it feels unsafe or that there's a threat or there's an unknown, then it goes right back to that template. That template can include things like affinity bias. Affinity bias is a preference for something similar to you. It's like, I'm going to take you all back to high school. I don't know if you were in the lunchroom and you saw like, oh, the athlete sitting at one table and the math squad sitting at another table and the cheerleader sitting at one. That's affinity. And it's great if it's on the surface, but what happens when affinity looks like I hire people that are like me? Or when I go into audit, I'm much kinder to people that are like me versus people that are different than me. Confirmation bias. That's focusing on supporting information. So have any of you ever, had to receive information about, let's say, a department, and they're like, look, before you go do this risk assessment, I need you to know the manager is a jerk. They're going to try to get over on you. And guess what? They're not going to answer your questions honestly. And you go in like, okay, I'm ready. And then you go into that meeting. You never get to know the individual in front of you. You're looking for everything they do to confirm the beliefs you already have. Who can relate to that? Yes, I see some hands and I see some heads nodding. That is confirmation bias. So the moment you feel like that is happening, push past that and ask an open-ended question to get to know the person in front of you. Authority bias, overvaluing someone's opinion because they're an authority figure. So that can look like, you know what? This director, whatever they say, I'm going to go with it and not question it. But This staff auditor, I'm going to question everything they say because they've only been here 2 years and they don't have the seniority or the rank. Yes, I understand hierarchical respect, but is it fair and is it inclusive, and is that going to help you reach your goal? Gender bias, one of my favorite. In the US, they did a study and they found out that women are 33% more likely to get interrupted in meetings, to get spoken over in meetings. In the United States, they did an audit about pay. There's a pay gap with women from anywhere from 75 cents to 53 cents to every dollar. In the United States, a lot of Fortune 100 companies do not have women a part of their executive leadership team, or they have one. All of this plays a role in gender bias. Again, seeing the world as I see it. Sitting on a panel, they're looking at promoting a woman to, what was it, COO, and she had recently had a child. The question was, do you think she's going to be focused? And do you think she's going to have what it takes to do her job now that she had a baby 2 years ago? Going back into courage, having to be super respectful, because my first thought was, what? How dare you, right? But I couldn't do that. So I asked, I find that interesting because this is not a question that has come up when we questioned the last 3 male executives we were looking at for the same role. So may I ask, again, question, curiosity, may I ask, what makes you feel that she wouldn't be focused on the job, being that all of her numbers support that she would be amazing at this job? That's gender bias. And finally, I'll say anchoring bias, relying too heavily on the initial information you received. So instead of digging deeper and asking more questions, you're going off of the first piece of information you see. I see this a lot with AI. And I said I wasn't going to talk a lot about AI, but I see this a lot. We take the first answer AI gives us. We don't do any additional research. But we just learned yesterday about AI hallucinations. So how are we digging deeper? Now, I just said a lot, so I have a question for you. Which bias have you observed the most in the workplace? Please scan the QR code and put your answers. I'm very interested to see this. These are good. Okay. They're coming in. Thank you, everyone, so much for participating. Yes. Okay, so the biggest one for authority bias, yes, can definitely understand that. Okay, a close second is gender bias, okay? Confirmation bias is still coming in. Thank you so much, everyone, for answering those. Thank you. And so here's the thing. We all have bias. It's not saying that this is going to completely go away. But when you start to notice certain things, when you start to notice I'm walking in with a certain opinion, when you notice that your female colleague, every time she gives a suggestion in a meeting, it is always disregarded, but then a male can come and say the same thing and everyone thinks it's the best idea ever. And women, I see you smiling and nodding. That's when we can help each other out. Cultural intelligence was one of those. And that's why I'm not surprised to see the authority bias as much. You see, I wanted to look at the differences between the US culture and Mexican culture within the workplace. Even though we're like cousins, I still wanted to see those differences. Now, the US culture is very individualistic. It's all about independence and self-expression and saying what needs to be said. Very direct. Whereas, according to studies, Mexican culture seems to be more about teamwork and harmony and group decision-making and politeness. But what if I went into a Mexican organization with my Western individualistic culture, and I come in without greeting, without getting to know anyone, and I'm just asking questions, getting straight to the point, will I build relationship? Absolutely not. Communication style. Low context, so like I said, US, very direct, doesn't always understand nuance. Mexican culture, more polite, more indirect, more high context. And it makes sense when you compare the cultures, right? Like American culture, the US culture has been around for 200 and something years versus thousands of years here, so there's more cultural dynamic. And then finally, respect for hierarchy. So when you look at egalitarian type of leadership versus hierarchical leadership, you're going to see a difference in that hierarchy bias, that authoritative bias. So am I going in, am I addressing the person with the formal title, Mr., Mrs., giving a certain respect, or am I going and just calling them by their first name and going to sit in their chair in their office, be like, what's up? Funny story, my mom, she's a baby boomer, very hierarchical. She hired someone and that person called her hun and then called her by her first name. My mom called me, she said, Ama, can I fire her, please? I said, Mom, why? She's disrespectful. Oh, whoa, Ma, let's talk about it, right? Like, tell me why. Let's communicate. Maybe there's a cultural intelligence that needs to be bestowed upon the person. But why does this matter? Because you all, as internal auditors, are engaging with people. And the more you build a relationship, depending on the type of internal audit you do, the better outcomes you will get. The better responses you will get to your questions. The more accuracy and honesty you will have when you're engaging with people. And so you see these 6 signature traits. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But when we think about commitment, it's your belief in the business case. It's your belief that voices on your team, regardless of their tenure, regardless of their rank, regardless of their gender, their generation, they deserve to be heard. And then when we think about courage, it's speaking up. Another story, I know I have a lot of them. So I am on the PTA, so Parent-Teacher Association at my son's school. The moms kind of drive me a little crazy. They have a chat for everything. But we were planning Hispanic Heritage Month. And so going back to courage, we're sitting there having a conversation about Hispanic Heritage Month, and everyone that was in the conversation about planning Hispanic Heritage Month was not Hispanic. Does that make sense? Absolutely not. So I was like, okay, I gotta be the one to call it out yet again. So I raised my hand. I know they're tired of me. They probably want to kick me out the group, but it's fine. I raised my hand and I was like, excuse me, should there be other people a part of this conversation? Maybe people with more lived experiences. And they're like, oh my God, I didn't even think about that. Really? Okay. Let's start engaging some other people, some diverse voices, some diverse perspectives to impact the workplace the way we need to impact it. So here are some techniques. Remember I said it starts with onboarding. So let's say you have a new auditor, okay? You have a new auditor on your team, or they transferred laterally. You want to proactively address gaps. So whether that is telling them, hey, when we go into a local client, this is how we do certain things. This is how we assess information. These are the turnaround times we expect. This is how often we engage with the person and, nudge them that we need all of the information within a certain amount of time. This is how we do things. Again, you're inviting someone into your home, but are you telling them the spoken and unspoken rules? Admit errors. I know. Admit them transparently, especially in audit findings. That is when we model accountability. But it's also about how we do it. The turnaround time. Are we auditing our own decisions? So it's very important to have a process on auditing your own decisions. I'm going to skip to collaboration. So, with collaboration, I remember yesterday we were talking about areas for ethics, right? So I can tell you within human resources, we do different audits. I was consulting for a construction company. It had over 1,500 people, and they had a turnover problem. A turnover problem in a specific area. Going back to audit, the first thing I did, lead with data. Show me the spreadsheet, show me the people that have been terminated, show me the departments, show me in the amount of time. So write this down. You lead with data. Lead with data when you're collaborating with different departments. So after we ran the numbers, we were able to see that people were leaving in under 30 days within a specific department. And then when we drilled down even more, we saw there were 2 managers that had the highest turnover rate. This impacts you as auditors. Because what if the people that are making the mistakes either are still there, or they leave, or they're an integral part of your case that you're trying to build? And so after the data, we were able to start having behavioral conversations. But I did not lead with judgment. I didn't go to the manager and say, "Why are you being a jerk to those people? Why are you so mean?" No, tell me more about what's going on, leading with curiosity, to see if there are any barriers that we can remove. It's all about relationships. It's about relationships. It's about body language. So when you walk into an office and you're about to audit someone, are you walking in, "Hello, I'm here from whatever department, and this is what we're going to do. These are the questions I'm going to ask you. Please pull out da 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 da." They're probably a little afraid. And you may not get the responses you need because they might be intimidated. Imagine if I would have come on this stage and I was like, "Hello, how are you? My name is Ama. I'm really happy to be here. And today we're going to talk about inclusive leadership, and I hope you participate." You're going to be like, "Gabrielle, never again," okay? And that is the same when you are engaging with people, a part of your organization, or when you're going into audit, or when you're going in to look at compliance issues. It's about the relationship. How are you leading with curiosity? What questions, what intentional questions are you asking? What are your responses to those questions? And so a speaker mentioned yesterday, are you telling them the why behind the questions you're asking, as well as what to expect after the conversation is done? Because I can tell you, when you leave, people are like this. I've been in HR, and the auditors are coming. I'm like, "Oh my goodness, we have to clean it all up." And they come and they have a conversation, and I'm trying to be on my best behavior, and then they leave, and I have no clue what's going to happen next. And I'm like, am I going to have a job next month? So that communication is very, very important. So we talked about a lot. I talked about the 6 C's of inclusive leadership and its impact on innovation. When you start to distribute decision-making, or when you start to collaborate, it helps with organization innovation. But it starts with that self-awareness. What are some of my biases? Funny story, my grandmother always raised us, this is what professionalism is, this is what professionalism is. My mom's the same way, this is what professionalism is. And then one day I decided to shave my head. And I sent my grandmother a picture. And she said, "Oh, Lord, oh, okay, honey, how is this going to impact your job?" And I mean, if you're happy, I'm happy. And then she said, "But you are happy, aren't you?" I'm like, "Yes, Grandma, I'm not having a nervous breakdown." But imagine her with her bias on what professionalism is if she was now in the hiring seat and I go interview for a job. Without knowing me, seeing this low cut, she might automatically discount me from being that internal auditor because of how I'm presenting. So that is why it's so important to be aware of our biases and combating it, asking questions, asking ourselves the 5 whys, having an accountability partner, doing the Socratic method to really understand, why am I making these decisions? Why am I engaging with people in this manner? Do I see a pattern in my behavior? That is a part of that awareness and that bias. And when we talk about techniques, lead with data, follow with stories, audit your own decisions, ask very intentional, open-ended questions, and develop your team. Develop your team by having one-on-ones. Develop your team by putting them on assignments that might be a bit of a stretch. You can develop your team by including them in decision-making processes, or even just explaining why, so they can understand how leadership makes decisions. But it can also look like, hey, I know you're new in this department. I remember what it was like to be new. No, I'm not a leader, but come. Let me talk to you about what we do here and how we do it so you can feel more comfortable. That is inclusion. That is inclusive leadership. So I have one last question for you. What are you going to work on? What is one that you will work on improving within the next 30 days? Please scan the QR code. And I would love to hear from all of you. What do you feel like you need to work on? This is the self-awareness piece. Oh, wow, the commitment. Yes, cognizance of bias, curiosity. I'm loving these. Keep them coming. Cultural intelligence. But that commitment is the top one. Be committed to inclusion. Be committed to kindness. Let's just start with kindness, with intentionality in our questions, with explaining the why, and with maybe speaking up just a bit if we see something is not fair and equitable. Everyone, I appreciate you so very much. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for your smiles, your nods. And if you have any questions, we're going to take questions, but if you want to talk to me after this because you have something specific going on your team, please talk to me afterwards or scan the QR code so we can chat later. Thank you so much.
Come on, give it up for Ama. And please send us your questions. Come on, don't be shy. Vamos, ahí empezaron a aparecer.
Okay.
Okay, so let me help you with that for the audience. Are there methodological frameworks that allow auditing inclusion culture within an organization without falling into subjectivity? And how can the internal audit function validate the effectiveness of inclusive policies beyond their formal existence? Oh.
Yeah, that's a good question. So one framework that I love is the RACI matrix or the RACI model, because it talks about whose responsibility is it, who should be included, who should be informed. And a lot of times when we talk about that collaboration, it's hard because we don't know who's supposed to be doing what. And so that RACI model allows for accountability. The next thing I will say is, with the different frameworks, I love the Tutman model. because the Tupman model allows for dynamic teams. So you have forming, storming, norming, performing. You'll see where you are within those, and whichever group your team is in, that allows you to then do an audit, dig deeper, figure out what activities you all can do for more inclusion within your teams. But it's also a way for you to add questions to your audit to understand where the people are on those teams.
Great, thank you, Emma. And how can the audit team identify when an audit finding involving a difference in outcomes or behaviors is due to a cultural bias rather than a control failure?
Great question. And of course, this is more of a depends on the situation. But what I will say is that's why I love data, because if I start to see a trend with those outcomes or behaviors, then I know that is a control failure, okay? So it's the trends and behaviors. What I'm also seeing, so like as an investigator when I go in, I'm also seeing, okay, what are your policies? And then I am comparing it to, are there any progressive disciplinary actions? Are there any coachings that are all related to this policy that is causing this outcome or behavior? If I'm seeing a lot of coachings or progressive disciplinary actions as I'm partnering with HR, then that lets me know it's a systems or control failure. But again, the trends allow for that. And before I even start looking into trends, I like to ask myself the 5 whys. So the 5 whys is, okay, this is what I see, it seems suspicious, why? Okay, I answer that question, I ask why again. I answer that question, I ask why again. And with that why, I'm also asking the impact of what I found. And if the impact is great enough for the business, then it's problematic and I'm digging deeper.
Okay, thank you. Now, how can internal audit teams operationalize inclusive leadership threats into audit methodology?
Yes, so this is a 2-part question. So when you're talking about operationalizing leadership traits, you want to start with every part of the employee life cycle. So we're starting with the interviews. What are the interview questions? Is there an area that you all are seeing that becomes very problematic from an audit perspective that you see a lot of people committing? Then we're going to include those type of questions within the interview process. Then it goes into your onboarding and your training. How many people or new employees have any process of audit included within their onboarding and their training? That is very important for people to understand what you do. So when you come to them, they understand why you're coming to them. And then when we go on the back end, you can do things like exit interviews. On the back end, you can also include tallying the data to see why people are leaving, how long it takes to turn that position around. And then the second part was, as far as audit findings, I would say that collaboration piece is going to be really important. And so when you are looking at your people issues, you just want to include questions within your assessments that are going to help you resolve that. And I hope I answered that last part.
Okay, this one sounds a bit like a complaint. How can a director be made to understand that the workplace climate does not depend solely on employees, but mainly on their leadership and management style?
You just go in and tell them. I'm playing. That's a joke. No, don't do that. So lead with data, okay? So one way you can lead with data is definitely surveys, but surveys, a lot of people aren't completing it. Average rate of survey completion is 33% right now. Another way you can do is by looking at turnover. Another thing you can do is looking at things like attendance or safety. So safety is a huge indicator on employee morale. Another thing you can do is, let's see, when you are dealing with that leader, one-on-one, and I teach a class on like giving feedback, so you gotta give the feedback properly, but you should go in with the data. And not only the data on your people, but how the people are impacting the process, how the people are playing a role in the strategic plan, and how their nonsense is impacting the strategic plan and the outcomes from that. And then you will start to see a trend, again, patterns and trends, and your job is to present that to your leader. And the leader may look at it and be like, wow, these are awful and y'all suck, because they're completely unaware. But when enough data shows that the problem is on that leader's team, then we can offer some suggestions like training, like coaching, like team building activities, or like different ways to facilitate a meeting. So I know that was a long response, but it was a very intricate question.
No, of course not. Was a good one, and we want to know what you have to say about this. Another complaint, I think. What do you recommend doing when there's no good leader who is also unwilling to engage in dialogue and begins to affect daily work?
I would start with the daily work. So I have a system on providing feedback. The most important things are asking the person, is it an okay time to speak? The second thing is making sure you have your data, making sure you have the impact of that data, and then opening it up for conversation. So what I would do, I would go to that leader, and I like to address their thoughts. So I know you don't have time right now. I know you're trying to do everything you can to hit whatever goal, but these actions are impacting my daily work in this way. In this way. So you're not making it about the person, you're making it about the behaviors and the actions. But most importantly, because what if they don't care about you? It's what your daily work is impacting on the overall team. So it's about the team, it's about the organization, it's about the process, and make it less about you. And if it continues to get worse and worse and worse, then obviously that's when you need to collaborate and partner with either human resources or employee relations or whatever department you have for your organization that helps with employees.
Okay, thank you for that answer. And let's not forget, we are among auditors. So how is the effectiveness of inclusive leadership measured within a work team?
Yeah, so many ways. You can look at amount of complaints that are filed to HR. You can look at accuracy before implementing something and then accuracy after and compare to see if there is a variance. I've known some internal audit teams that have issues with work turnaround time. You can look at your work turnaround time to see how these actions are impacting the ultimate goal. You can also look at certain metrics. I guess there are specific metrics within audit that you can just look at beforehand and afterhand. I will also say attendance is a huge role. So attendance, pay time off, all of those things. If you're starting to see an increase and it's not scheduled for like vacation, sometimes that's an indicator on how that person is perceiving your team. But those complaints, partnering with HR, looking at turnaround time, looking at accuracy metrics are all indicators of inclusive workplace cultures.
Great. Ama, do you think emotional intelligence goes hand in hand with cultural intelligence when building truly inclusive workplaces?
Absolutely. I think every leader, and this is a strong statement, I think every leader should take the emotional intelligence assessment. Now, one of my issues with emotional intelligence assessments, it doesn't always have cultural competence, but for the most part, 80% of it is really good because it's not only saying how are people experiencing me, it's how am I also perceiving things. And it will tell you, and it will tell you specifically the things you need to do to work on it. So yes, emotional intelligence is very important because what we don't want to do is fall into ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism is judging people and judging processes based on how we do things because we think our way is superior versus how they do things. And we don't want to fall into that. And so that's why it's so important to assess yourself first to see where you struggle.
Thank you. Based on your experience, how is it possible to mitigate the company's authority bias, considering that the personnel assigned to these positions hold power and the organization's trust to make better decisions?
Yes, create feedback loops. So I'm speaking from the perspective of every organization is not going to be this egalitarian, the leader looking at themselves as one of the employees. Like, that's just not real. You have some cultures that still very much believe in hierarchy, and that's okay. But are you hearing from the people below you? So those feedback loops are important. So having ways for people to give their feedback, having ways for people to challenge a thought. So it can be something as simple as in your meetings. Are you doing best case scenario, worst case scenario? And are you having the people that disagree with the change speak up first? Because oftentimes the person who speaks first is the person who agrees with the boss, and then groupthink happens. Groupthink is when everybody just starts agreeing and thinking the same thing so they can be good with the boss. So you can schedule or set up times where you have literally an easel, and you're like, all right, we got to make this happen. So tell me all the worst things that can happen, and you're listing that. And then you go to all the best things that can happen, and then you all collaborate. One final thing I'll say is within those feedback loops, it's important that you communicate as a leader, if you're going to implement feedback loops, exactly what you're doing with the information. Because if you do not tell people what you're doing with the information and they do not hear from you, that will deteriorate trust. So, example is, I might not take every single person's suggestion. I might think some suggestions are ridiculous. But this is my process on evaluating feedback. Now it's fair, and now it's equitable, and it's not, I'm just listening to those people who are my favorites.
Thank you. And, last one, congratulations on your presentation. You made us reflect on the importance of identifying our personal biases and how they can influence an internal audit. Do you have any recommendations for narrowing the gender equity gap? Yeah?
I'm so passionate about this topic, I could be up here another 15 minutes talking about it, but I'll keep it short. One thing I'll do is first, again, lead with the data. So first you need to understand if you even have a gender gap in your organization. So how many people are male, how many people are female, and not only that, but it's good to look at it by department and by hierarchy within the organization. The next thing you can do is sourcing. So where are you sourcing your information? So I deal with this a lot in the tech industry. They're like, I just don't know any women that, are good at tech. And I'm like, really? There are millions of them, right? So where are you putting out the information that you're hiring? Do you also, another thing you can do is build partnerships with women's organizations around your area. Another thing you can do is have developmental opportunities within your organization for women. So whether that is an employee resource group, whether that is, we're going to have these top 10 women that we're going to have a mentorship program with. One last thing I'll say is audit pay. Pay the people, audit pay, put it in your budget for pay increase, because that will also attract women, as well as having policies and procedures in place that support work-life balance and women being able to thrive both in the boardroom and at home.
So, ladies and gentlemen, please give it up.
Thank you so
much. A big round of applause for Ama Agyapong. Here's a gift on behalf of the IMA. Thank you so much for this incredible presentation.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Ama. Okay.
Well done. That was the last presentation. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Now it's lunch break. We will be back at 10 after 3, so take that time to reflect upon this and also to make an assessment, or please complete the evaluation of the speakers. That's very important information. Thank you so much. Bon appetit, and see you after lunch.